So we're finally talking about political parties, and everyone has strong opinions, and you probably had the dinner table conversations or the Thanksgiving table conversations where someone storms out because they're angry over taxes or who to vote for. The purpose of this lesson is just to clearly define what each party believes and to help you understand what each party believes so that you can make your own decision about which party to vote for. There are specific issues that people vote on, and we can divide them up into three categories: social issues, economic issues, and foreign policy issues. So take social issues, for example. Social issues are going to be things that deal with like civil rights, usually have some moral component to them, things like abortion, gay marriage, welfare programs. Economic issues, people that vote on economic issues are often called pocketbook voters, or people that vote out of their pocketbook because they're concerned strictly with how much taxes are being taken out of my paycheck, how big is the government. There are some people that vote strictly on foreign policy issues. Should America be involved in wars overseas? Should America be more isolationist? Should we build a wall to prevent immigration? All of these issues come together and we get two parties for you to choose from. You can either be a Republican or a Democrat. There are third parties, there's Green parties, and there's Libertarians, but for the most part, Republican and Democrats are your two major parties, and they're the parties that get elected. So that's what we're going to talk about, is the Republican and Democratic parties. But because there's such a wide view on these issues, you can end up being socially liberal and economically conservative, or you might be economically liberal and socially conservative. So you have to understand what's important to you. Do you vote mostly because of social issues, or do you vote mostly because of economic issues, or do all of your issues align with your party? So let's take a look at the political spectrum. Political spectrum sort of classifies and shows that while we have two parties, it's not static, and it's definitely, you can be more conservative on certain things and more liberal on others. So when you draw a line, we say that liberals or Democrats are on the left, and conservative and Republicans we put on the right. And if you start on the left is going to be the most government, right? That's where you're going to have your Socialist Party and extreme left-wing Democrats. But then as you move towards the middle, you're going to get more moderate, and you're going to believe in some government involvement, but not complete government involvement, right? And then as you move to the right side, you're going to believe that government should be less. And if you move all the way to the right, of course, you would be into like libertarianism and anarchy. So there is a spectrum. So for example, you might believe in a social issue. Let's say you believe that in abortion, you should be allowed to have abortion. Well, that's a Democratic issue. Democrats believe in abortion, so you would be considered socially liberal. But let's say you believe that government shouldn't get involved and they shouldn't tax you as much and they should lower taxes. Well, now you are economically conservative. So which party do you vote for? Most candidates are going to move to the middle during a political party. They might have some extreme stances on some things, but for the most part, they're going to sort of try to bridge that gap in the middle because they realize that most people are not extremely left and they're not extremely right, that they're going to hover somewhere around in that moderate category. But you have to decide what issues are important to you if they don't all align in one particular party. But let's look at the fundamental beliefs of the two parties, and that has to do with the role and size of government. These two things are very different, and this does sort of present the basis for the two parties going all the way back to the Founding Fathers. What is the role of government? Is it the role of government to be involved and provide for people? Or is it the role of government just to protect them and let free markets and capitalism take over? These are the fundamental core issues. So Republicans. Republicans are the elephant. Government should protect people, but should not interfere in their lives or businesses. They're going to believe in free markets in the private sector. So, for example, they're not going to believe that you should be heavily taxed or that government should come in and tell businesses, hey, you have to do this or you have to do that. And things like OSHA and government regulations, they're going to want private business to be first and foremost and government regulation to be second. As far as welfare programs, they're going to believe that individuals make their own choices and it is up to them to better themselves, not the government's role to provide for them. If you think of a champion of the Republican Party, you're going to think of somebody like Thomas Jefferson, who said a government big enough to give you everything you want is big enough to take away everything you have. The Democrats is going to believe that it is government's role to ensure everyone has equal access and opportunity. So all of your welfare programs, Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, all of that stuff stems from this idea that it is the government's role to provide for the poor. So, for example, taxes. The higher classes would pay more in taxes, and then that money would go to provide for the lower classes to give them equal access and opportunity. So if you're thinking of someone to champion the Democratic Party, it's going to be somebody like FDR, who said the test of our progress is not whether we add more to the abundance of those who have much, is whether we provide enough for those who have little. So there is a very fundamental core difference in what is the role of government, and you have to decide what do you think is the government's role and the size and scope of government. So let's take a very practical example, because this is what comes up a lot in political elections is taxes. How much should be taxed? Who should be taxed? A Republican is going to believe that taxes should be equal across the board. Everyone gets taxed equally. Whether you're Bill Gates and you're a billionaire, you get it taxed at the same rate as Joe Schmo who works at the grocery store. Some people, even if that's just an extreme example, moving to the far right, would be that there's no taxes and you get taxed strictly on what you buy. That way, things like property tax and car taxes would go away, because it would be strictly based on can you afford it, then you buy it, leaving things up to the free market and capitalism. Democrats would believe in a progressive income tax where people at the higher ends, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, they pay more in taxes because they're able to, and then that money then goes to the lower classes and then lifts them up out of poverty. And so the more money you make, the more you pay in taxes. Sort of like this bubble, like if the bottom sectors have more money and are able to lift themselves out of poverty, then everybody sort of rises on this bubble. That's the image that's often associated with that. There's good and bad on both sides. It's just what you believe the role and scope of government should be. Do you believe that it is the government's role to provide for the poor and equal the playing field? Or do you believe in private sector and individualism is to be the dominating factor and less government? Hopefully this will help explain and guide your thought process when you're looking at candidates and how to evaluate who to vote for in the upcoming elections.